Well, good afternoon once again. I am so glad to be back here with you. And yes, I am teaching 3rd through 5th graders this afternoon, but they are still my favorite group to teach. I love it. And it is going to be wonderful. Hopefully a journey home not in the dark, in the rain and thundering, all sorts of stuff that I was in last night. And it wasn't too bad last night. I've got some good windshield wipers, but it was still, again, more rain than I had seen in Columbia for a while. We are in a little bit of a mild drought up there. Galatians chapter 5 is where we're going to be. Galatians chapter 5. And I want to start off by reading the first verse of Galatians chapter 5. We're going to talk about this afternoon briefly freedom from digital addictions and how to control our technology so that it doesn't control us. There's a lot of things that we can think about as far as this, and I always am conflicted because as much as I have said this morning and as much as I'm going to say this afternoon, there's so much more to be said about this topic. There's so much more to be said about the ways that we are interacting with the digital world today and the ways that we will interact with the digital world in the future and in the future years, and how our children and our children's grandchildren will do that as well. So right now is a pretty interesting point in our society and in humanity, because we have to learn how to deal with this technology to use it as a proper tool. But we also also need to learn how to have that freedom from it. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. Very simply it says here, "For freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, and do not submit again to a yoke of slavery." I want you to keep that verse in mind. We're going to come back to that verse. We're going to talk about a little bit about a story in Exodus as well. It's a strange place to go, but I think we can get some points from it this morning. I want you to think about for just a second, when was the last time that you remember being without your phone? Okay? I love when I ask this question, some of the older people are like, well, I never had one in the first place, so it doesn't really matter. And they have the point of pride right there, right? Well, think about it seriously for a second. When was the last time you were without your phone? When was the last time you were disconnected from that? I get annoyed. We have a pretty big campus, and sometimes I have to walk across I call it the tarmac. We have an enormous parking lot. I walk across that parking lot to the TV studio or to our youth activity center, and I'll have forgot my phone at my desk, and I'm just annoyed by that. I'm like, oh, I forgot my phone. I need it. No, I don't. I don't need my phone to go check on something for 5 minutes across the parking lot, but it annoys me when I don't have it. Think about the last time that you didn't have your phone. Now, a supplementary question to this is, how many of you think you're addicted to your phones, addicted to your screens? How many of you think that? I already have an answer for you, regardless of what you said to yourself just then. It's all of us. This was not a staged photo, I promise. I took this on a mission trip. The average age at this table here is 71. And so it is truly all of us. I turned around and saw them all looking at their phones and not talking to one another, and I said, this is a golden opportunity. I can use this as blackmail for the rest of their lives. And sure enough, it affects us all. It turns out they were just looking at the schedule. We had been sent a link. We were on a mission trip, and we were looking at a schedule for something that was going to happen the next day, and you know how they are. They want to know what's going to happen at that next schedule. So, and again, it's really interesting, though, how much differently we would think, oh, well, this just affects the kids. No. This does not affect kids. This affects all of us. I was sitting there the other day with my phone, scrolling through my phone, doing something. Was not doing what my kid thought it was. And by about probably the 3rd or 4th time, him saying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." And he looks at me, he grabs my face with both of his hands and turns his face to me and says, "No more email, Daddy." I wasn't emailing, but that's irrelevant. It's not beside the point. Our attention has been siphoned to these devices. It zaps us. As one of our young people so eloquently put it this morning, it sucks us in. It creates that alternate reality we're going to have to learn how to deal with. And so when we think about that, we're going to talk about three things this afternoon. We're going to talk about what our addiction actually is, first of all, because we first have to know who our enemy is. And then we're going to talk about what Scripture says we should do with basically any addiction. And then we're going to hopefully explore some real steps. I've got some real things that we can do to help us deal with this smartphone usage. So, what are we addicted to? Before I do that, when we think about this, how much control are you giving the screen in your pocket? You may think that you're not giving it very much control, but we give the screens in our pockets quite a bit of control these days. I always hesitate to put up a cigarette ad, but it's going to make my point, I believe. When I ask a group of kids who this is, they usually can't tell me who it is. Anybody over the age of about 30 probably knows who it is. It's the Marlboro Man, right? He was in advertisements that used to be allowed to be on billboards, used to be allowed to be in magazines. Those have since been outlawed. All sorts of different things because we finally figured out that cigarettes are actually pretty bad for us. But in the 1950s and 60s, and if you grew up in those times, if you were alive during that period, you'll understand what I'm about to say. Smoking was everywhere in America. You'd see people smoking in offices and restaurants, people smoking on airplanes, which that boggles my mind. People even smoking in hospitals. Doctors would come to deliver a diagnosis with a cigarette in their mouth. It was just one of these things that was just a normal part of everyday life. And I don't know about you, but I look back on those times and it seems just crazy that we would glorify something like that was so obviously bad for our health. But when we look back on images from that era, when we look back on the Marlboro Man, the tough, rugged American man who, he smoked and you can smoke too, and that'll be great for you, and that'll be great for... We look back on that and we say, that was a little silly, right? That was very, very unwise of us to say those things, right? But what about the pictures of, just like the ones of the senior citizens that I've shared, what about the pictures that we're going to see of people that are sitting all at a dinner table and looking at their phones? What are we going to say about that in 10, 20, 30 years? When we look back at images of that era of cigarettes, we say, how misguided could we be? But when we look back on images of kids sitting, or adults sitting, or senior citizens sitting at the same table and all looking at their phones and not each other, what are we going to say about that? Well, how misguided could we have been? So again, we have to think about those different things. 97% of Americans now own a smartphone. I heard from one guy here this morning who just got his, so he was part of that 3% that didn't have them up until recently, right? When we think about this, the same people that kind of talked about getting cigarettes out of the health and making those health risks, make sure that we know about those. They wouldn't think driving 60 miles an hour twice down the highway, looking at a cell phone. And when we think about that, we think about how these phones and these devices are parts of our lives. We sleep with our phones beside us. It's usually the first thing that we look at in the morning and the last thing that we put down. I have to ask the question, is that healthy? Is that healthy for our mental well-being? Is it healthy for our spiritual well-being? Since 2007, there have been billions of devices that have been manufactured and put in people's hands. And again, this has brought us a communication revolution like we've never seen before. These are tools that are amazing to use in communication and entertainment and all sorts of different things. I love the fact that I am going to be able to watch the Formula One race that I missed this morning when I get home this evening. I'm going to be able to see that and see them racing because of the technology of the day. It was recorded. It was automatically put there for me, and I can go watch that right now. If you missed something back when I was growing up as a kid in the 80s, if you missed something on television, you missed it, period. Charlie Brown Christmas came on one time a year. If you didn't videotape it, you missed it, period. And so we understand that and the access that we have is amazing. These billions of devices is amazing. But again, it's going to be something that we have to manage. I've asked this question several times this morning. What would the apostles have done with Instagram? What if Jesus had a YouTube account? What would Paul have used on Twitter? Well, they would have used it to glorify God, and so should we. This is Dr. B.J. Fogg. I want to tell you a little bit about him. Dr. B.J. Fogg he's not a bad guy. You know, he's not evil. He's not famous either. You're not going to see him. He's not a celebrity. You're not going to see him on TED Talks. You're not going to see him, on the news or anything like that. But he is probably mostly responsible for the modern way that you interact with social media today. He's the founder of the Persuasive Technology Lab at Stanford University. He has had students in his class that went on to start other little projects like Snapchat and Instagram. And so when we think about the father of modern addiction by design, all sorts of different things, it started right there in Palo Alto, California with Dr. Fogg. And almost anyone, when we think about, I want you to think about the motto of the Persuasive Technology Lab. Their motto is, we design machines to change humans. Now, I want you to think about that statement and what it says and what it does not say for a second. We design machines to change humans, not humans' behavior, not to change people's thoughts and actions and different things. We design machines to change humans. We design machines to change how everybody thinks of, or their perception of reality is. And I want you to think about that and think about the context of what we have dealt with over the course of the pandemic, over the course of the last few years before that, about how all the different things that we have to make sure that we're managing, we design machines to change humans, and that is exactly what has happened. Our perceptions have been changed. Our mental attitudes, our different outlooks and perceptions of life have been changed by these different ideas, whether they're right or not. And so whenever we see something like this, it's very amazing to think about. We simply lack self-control sometimes, being able to manage our devices. And anyone with a screen in their pocket, I think, suffers from some sort of smartphone or screen addiction. Cigarettes, it was by design. With smartphones, it's even more by design. It's intentional. It is absolutely engineered in a way for us to be addicted to it, to come back to it. I always ask kids when I'm talking about this, I say, tell me what dopamine is. Well, dopamine, we probably know what dopamine is. It's the happy chemical, right? It's the chemical that makes you feel good. It's the chemical that you get when you kiss your girlfriend. It's the chemical that you get when my wife rearranges the furniture. That's the chemical. She loves to do that. Every time I'm going to come home and the furniture is going to be rearranged, she's going to go, "Do you like it?" And I'm going to be like, I don't even care anymore. And so that's how it's going to be. And she's probably listening right now, actually. But it's the happy chemical, and it's the same happy chemical that happens when we see those likes popping up on our post on Facebook. When we see somebody agreeing with us, "Oh, right on, man," or something like that. "You said it the best." All these others did. When we see those likes on Instagram tick up one by one. In fact, Instagram stopped doing that. They stopped showing you the number of likes in real time because they figured out, their psychologists figured out that it was so detrimental to teens' health to just sit there and watch their likes come up. They stopped doing it. We keep that streak alive on Snapchat. I don't know if even that's still a thing. Is that still a thing? Keeping streaks alive? No? Yes, I get this and then I get this. I don't know which one it is. They're confused. They don't know. So anyway, when we keep scrolling and we keep scrolling, we talked about that this morning, that is that nonstop information. But guess what? All that's only temporary. We keep coming back to it like slot machines. I know none of us have ever hopefully been in a gambling casino, but when you go to Las Vegas, what do they got? Lines of slot machines. You know why the slot machines are so popular? Because they are engineered in a way for you to constantly come back. It is called variable rewarding. And it is going to vary the times where it rewards you. That way you think the next pull on that slot machine is going to be the next big one for me. I'm going to get $2,000 off of this pull. I'm going to win $10,000 off of this one. And you're sitting there with nickels in your hands. It's the same way. You ever wonder why it's pull to refresh on Instagram or pull to refresh on your email? It's the same thing, almost like pulling that lever on a slot machine. You're doing the same exact thing. You're getting that dopamine hit off of that. When we think about this, and when we think about this idea, and we're going to go to Exodus here in just a second, but most of us require a cue to stop consuming, but our devices don't do that for us. We're going to have to do it ourselves. Snapchat capitalizes on loyalty to users by keeping streaks alive. TikTok capitalizes on it to just give you that constant scroll of nonstop funny videos about if you have looked at a video, they know the difference between looking at a video for 1 second and looking at a video for 5 seconds. And they can, based upon their algorithm, they can figure out exactly what video to serve for you next. You could have the same video, watching it with the same person sitting right beside you, and when you scroll, theirs goes to a different video because the algorithm is at play. We're almost at odds with that algorithm these days. Facebook uses an ever-evolving algorithm to track every like and comment and click so it can predict what kind of posts that are going to keep you reading. And most of all, what kind of posts are going to make you angry. Did you know that? Facebook's #1 metric that they measure everything by is anger. They figure you will interact with something if it makes you angry. I'm going to share this because that makes me angry. I'm going to like this statement because that makes me angry. That's an outrage. I'm going to share this post. I'm going to do whatever because it makes me angry. They know that anger literally sells, and it makes them money. But if we know that going ahead of time, we know not to interact with those things. The New York Times did a study in 2014. 2014, that was a long time ago now. 2014, that Facebook users are spending a collective 39,757 years on the platform each day. So to put that in perspective, every day we are spending nearly 40,000 years on Facebook, every single one of us that are on Facebook. That's crazy. When we think about how our hands appeal to these screens, it appeals to us as if we want to belong to somewhere. We all want to belong to someone, to somewhere, to a community. And again, I said it this morning, but that is something that the Church of Jesus Christ can only provide. That is something that social media and technology promises, but it cannot deliver. Only the church can do that. The church is the greatest social network that we have. When we think about that, when we think about how we have grown afraid if we don't continually tell the world what's going on, or if we don't interact, or if we don't keep up with our Instagram or our blogs or whatever, we think we'll become invisible or irrelevant. And is that true? I don't think it is. I want you to turn your Bibles to Exodus chapter 20. This is a little bit of a peculiar place to go to talk about addiction and smartphone usage, but hopefully we can talk a little bit about it here. Exodus chapter 20, we're going to read there in verse 2 here in just a second. When you think of the 10 Commandments, what comes to your mind? What comes to your mind when you think about what God gave the Israelites in the 10 Commandments, and what comes to your mind? Wrongly, I think of sitting in my class in 4th grade. Miss Street, Riverton Elementary School, Newmarket, Alabama. I remember sitting there and I remember getting my name on the board. Do you remember getting your name on the board when you were a kid? Was that a good or a bad thing? That was a bad thing, right? If you got a check mark, if you got 2 check marks, you might as well just write your own death warrant, man, because it is coming. You're going to principal's office, your life is over, okay? But I think about that. I think about getting my name on the board. You know what? I don't follow the rules, so I get my name on the board. Oh, I get another check today because I sinned in this way, or I said something I wasn't supposed to say this way, or I did something unholy or ungodly today, so I get another check. And it's just like getting a check mark. And I think that that's how some people wrongly look at the 10 Commandments. That's a distorted view. But here's the thing about the Lord God. He's the best kind of teacher, and He knows us all, He loves us all, and He's in us all. And I can't really explain all that, but it's true. The commandments were given to God's people in response to who God is, not who they were. It was because of who God was and the rescue that He provided them from slavery. Chapter 20, verse 2. Let's read. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. First verse, He says, this is who I am. This is what I did for you. Verse 3, you shall have no other gods before me. He starts the commandments. Verse 4, you shall not make for yourself a carved image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Verse 5, you shall not bow down to them or serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God. Exodus 20 goes on, and you can read the rest of it to record the other commandments God handed down. Commandments that are going to be inscribed onto these stone tablets, and they were going to be put in an ark, an ornate piece of almost like furniture to preserve them. And the commandments that the children of Israel needed. Why? Because they had just come out of generations of slavery. That was all they knew. All they knew was slavery and being indentured servants. I don't know if we can contemplate necessarily in the modern age in America what it means to be a slave. I know I can't. And I know some of the kids may joke with their parents. You know, their parents say, well, I'm a slave at home and stuff like that. I do stuff at home. My dad made me mow the yard. I'm his slave. I understand that. But I don't think we understand the connotation of actually being a slave. Thinking about that, it brings up an interesting question. Are we slaves to these screens that we have? If we have come to the point of being addicted to them, if we have anxiety when we don't have them with us, if we're obsessed with checking them, it's the first thing that we look at in the morning, the last thing that we look at night. If we go for that dopamine hit every time we get a like or every time we hit that streak or anything, then we have become slaves to our screens. They own us. Now, remember I said Galatians chapter 5. Let's go back there. If our slaves own us, what can we do? Paul says to the Galatian church, he says, for freedom Christ has set us free. Stand firm, therefore, do not again submit to a yoke of slavery. Very simply, the Bible tells us you're not to be enslaved by anything. Not a phone, not a way of life, not money, not popularity, not a game, not an app. Christ is the only one that should define our identity, not our social media influencer presence, or who we are on certain things, or who we are in certain circles. So how do we make sure that our devices, that we control them, not the other way around? Got a couple of really practical things, I think, here, and a couple of steps that you can take. And again, these slides are going to be on my website. You can go to digitalparentingworkshop.com, and I'll email Drew with all that, and maybe y'all can put it in the bulletin this next week. But I'll email all that, and I've got some handouts, I've got some resources there, and all sorts of different things. How do we control our text so that it doesn't control us? I love what Cal Newport said in his book, Digital Minimalism. He said, simply put, humans aren't wired to be constantly wired. We have to put down the phones sometimes. We have to find ways to create those kinds of boundaries, and that's kind of the first thing that we're going to talk about, is setting those boundaries. I stopped wearing an Apple Watch. I've got just one of those little Casio digital watches because I'm an 80s kid and that's what I do. And I've got one of those things that literally just tells the time. Doesn't do anything else. It just tells the time. And I could not abide having an Apple Watch because it was constantly beeping, buzzing, all this other stuff. And when I would get home, I would set my phone down on the thing and turn it off and all this other stuff, and my watch would still buzz. My watch would still beep and all this other stuff, and I was getting distracted. So my boundary that I have set is when I get home, the phone goes down, and if I am wearing the Apple Watch, which I don't anymore, but if I am, it comes off. And that's 2 hours of the day that I don't have to respond to any messages or emails or any of that kind of stuff. I'm done for at least a little bit. And so that's a boundary that I've set. Another boundary that we have set is for the dinner table. We don't have any devices at the dinner table. You know, the dinner table is some of the most precious time that I have all day long. I've got little boys, and they will tell me silly jokes, and they will tell me little quips about their day, and it's just so wonderful that they're not stuck on an iPad or on a phone trying to talk to me. And so again, at least 3 times a week, we try to have dinner at the dinner table when we're not running around doing other things. That's a boundary that I've set. What's a boundary that you have set? What's some boundaries that you need to set? Maybe you need to turn off the Wi-Fi at a certain time every night. Maybe you need to make sure that the phones go into do not disturb at a certain time every night or at the dinner table. Maybe the phones stay upstairs or they go into a basket or whatever. Create those boundaries. Create opportunities is what you're creating for you to get closer with your family, to get closer with your children. Set boundaries. Number 2, use screen time or digital well-being. And this is the place that I tell all parents, grandparents, anybody looking for parental controls, this is where I tell you to start. Start right there. It's built in, and most of you probably already have done that. You do not need necessarily, especially if you have a child that's probably under the age of 12, you do not need to download something special, some crazy program or some amazing app to do parental controls for you. You can use those built in right on those devices now. Apple continues to improve, as well as Android continues to improve their parental controls with every new iteration of Android and iOS that come out. And usually both of those come out in the fall. And so about September, October, when you get ready to update your phone, and when you get ready to update your iPhone to iOS 16, it's going to have a few new parental control features in it. And so again, pay attention to those things, watch a YouTube video on it, figure out how you can best utilize that tool to protect your kids and to create those boundaries. This one is a very interesting one. And I use this quite often when I want to not be so hooked to my screen. You can use something called black and white mode or grayscale mode. And again, you can find that, I'm not sure if that actual settings thing is correct, but you can usually find it under accessibility on the iPhone. And it varies on different Android phones, but they also have those kinds of modes as well. It was originally designed for people who are colorblind, and they can see their phones a little bit better, and the colors wouldn't be distorted for them, because color blindness does not mean you don't see colors. Sometimes it means that you see the wrong colors. And so they tell you to set your phone into grayscale or black and white mode. Remember when I talked about the slot machines, and I talked about how the slot machine's main feature is that you do that little lever, and you're wanting to constantly do that lever, but you see all those little twinkling lights and colors and sounds and buzzes and all sorts of different things that they have going on. It just keeps you hooked. It's the same exact thing with your phone. How many times have you been in a conversation having to listen to somebody and you see your phone on the table and it goes, and that person's still talking? Okay. I gotta go check my phone. I'm sorry, I gotta see what it is. And that's that kind of desire that we have. We gotta know what was going on. Most of the time, it's nothing. But again, if we put our phone in black and white mode, grayscale mode, and I've got the next one, there's notifications. Turn off your notifications. I have notifications set for one application on my phone, and that's for text messaging. And with iOS with iPhones, with their focus modes, you can actually make it to where you can only get messages from a certain person or a certain group of people. And everybody else's gets sent to it just gets sent to notifications where you can check them later. So again, think about using focus modes. Think about using and turning off notifications. Black and white mode has been a very good thing for me going on vacations, paying attention to my kids when I need to be paying attention to them. And so it makes your mind think that your phone is less appealing. You put black and white mode on your phone for a day, and I guarantee you that you will look at it less. Because your phone doesn't see those bright colors. It doesn't see those little notification tags that pop up. It doesn't see the little banners and different things. It's amazing the difference that it makes. Okay? Moving on. Did I mess up something? I don't know if there's a trick to this. Might have to have some help here. Y'all put me to the next one. Turn off notifications, of course, and I have used the clicker too much this morning. That's what it is. Delete apps you're using too much. My challenge to you this week, go to your screen time settings, look at the app that you have used the most, and delete it for a week. See if that makes a difference in your life. I deleted Facebook for like 4 months off of my phone. It was amazing. Probably should do it again. In fact, it's probably a good time to do it again. I'm probably going to do that on the way home, actually. Think about that. Think about what you're devoting your time to. I think one of the gentlemen back here said it is a time sucker. It just sucks our time away. Take the one that you're using the most and delete it and see if it makes a difference for your phone in your life for a week. Again, you might be surprised at the results. Find opportunities to leave your screen behind. I know this is difficult, but find opportunities to say, hey, we're going on a walk as a family. We're leaving our phones at home. We're going to this soccer game. We're going to leave our phones in the car. Nothing is going to burn down. Nobody needs to get in touch with me for the next hour. It is going to be okay. And so if something is happening, somebody will find you, okay? But find opportunities to leave your screen behind. And find little different things and little different areas of your life that you can leave your screen behind and just disconnect for a little while. And then lastly, this evening or this afternoon, we need to submit to God and not some false life. One of the young ladies over here said that the thing that's wrong with social media is that it gives you this sense of an alternate reality, as if everybody's life is better than yours. Everybody has it better than you. Everybody has more money than you. They're better looking than you. And that's just not true. That is a falsehood. That is a false life that has been put before us on these screens that we just don't need to buy into. What we need to do is submit to the Lord God Almighty. He calls to us this morning. He calls to us. God met Jacob where he was when he wrestled with him. Jacob had not had a fair fight his entire life. He had connived, he had joked, he had swindled, he had stolen birthrights, he had done everything in his life but had a fair fight. And God came to him, and he had wrestled with people his whole life. God came to him as a wrestler. God comes to you this morning on the level that you are so that he can lift you up to be the person that he knows that you can be. He's waiting on you this afternoon. He's waiting on your children to come to him too. He's waiting on your family. And if you have not made the changes and made those things that you need to make, that you know that you need to make here today, you can do that. You can make that change. You can alter your course. You can get right back on the right path. If you need to be baptized for the remission of your sins in the waters of baptism in the blood of Jesus, you can also do that this afternoon. Why don't you come? Why don't you make that decision right now while we stand and while we sing?